away, my friend.
Hello.
Dr. Rowena Reyes. It is an honor for me to be here as the moderator for the fourth session. Well, this is really great and prestigious event, the 28th Annual AMIC Conference. For this plenary session 4, as Dr. Rowena mentioned earlier, we will talk about science communications and social media, information order or disorder. First of all, I would like to introduce you the worldwide speakers that we have here. It is very honored to have all the speakers here. First, I would like to introduce Professor Mohammed El-Guindi. Mohammed El-Guindi is a cybersecurity expert technologist, speaker, and researcher specializing in cybercrime, cyberterrorism, and technology. He works as cybercrime consultant and resource person for international organizations. Mohammed is also the official representative of the Information System Security Associations in Egypt. He runs Tech Talk, a weekly TV program in the Middle East that tackles controversial technical or scientific topics such as digital espionage and internet surveillance, 3D printing, and reverse engineering of the human brain. His research studies on cybercrime are published in leading journals and research websites and cited in UN reports and university research around the world. He has authored many books and pamphlets on cybercrime and related issues. And for the second speaker, we will have Professor Masato Kajimoto. Masato Kajimoto is an associate professor at the University of Hong Kong. He specialized in news literacy education and misinformation ecosystem research in Asia. He founded a region-focused education NPO called ANI, Asian Network of News and Information Educators, and leads a student-driven fact-checking project called ANI Lab. Masato was the chief producer of the massive open online course on Coursera titled Making Sense of the News, News Literacy Lessons for Digital Citizens as well. His recent publications include an entry on news literacy in Oxford Research Encyclopedia of Communications. Before beginning a career in teaching and research, he worked as an online reporter and web producer for CNN International. And the third speaker will have Ginny Smith. This is really interesting because she is a science writer and presenter with expertise in psychology and neuroscience. She has talent for making the complex comprehensible and a passion to bring her love of brain science to audience around the world. She founded Braintastic Science, which produced spectacular science shows and resources to help young people understand and get the best out of their brains. She is regularly found on stage or on screen at schools, festivals, and events, and release answering kids' questions about the brain, from why we dream to whether doctors could ever do a brain transplant. And the fourth speakers, we will have, just a moment, Professor Cheryl Ruth Soriano. I'm sorry if I'm misspelling. Cheryl Ruth Soriano is professor and research fellow in the Department of Communications at La Salle University. Her research examined the implication of digital communications on social, cultural, and political processes with a focus on the intersections of digital cultures and marginality. She sits in the editorial board of the ASEAN Journal of Communications, Journal of Applied Communication Research, Communication, Culture, and Critique, and PLENARY, Philippine Journal of Communications, Media, and Society, and has co-edited books and number of scholarly articles, policy brief, and op-ed pieces on digital media and communication in the Global South. She also leads various research and advocacy initiatives in the areas of digital labor, open access and democracy, and disinformation. Prof. Soriano had visiting fellowship at the Center of Communications, Politics, and Culture at RMIT University and at the Institute of Sociology and Anthropology in Peking University. She completed her PhD in Communications and New Media in the National University of Singapore. Without further ado, I would like to invite the first speaker, Professor Mohammed El Quddi, PhD. Time is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be with you in
Okay, I'm sorry for this technology problem. I think we can move to the second speaker while we waiting for Professor Mohammed. I would like to invite Professor Masato Kajimoto to present your paper. Time is yours.
Okay, hello, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, how about the screen? Are you seeing my slide? Okay, right. Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Masato Kajimoto. I'm an associate professor of practice at the University of Hong Kong. Thank you for inviting me to this very interesting panel. I would like to today, I was not planning to go first, and so I thought maybe I could probably, take it from the first speaker to talk about or introduce my topic. But since I cannot do that, I just tell you that my focus is slightly different. I just want to have one main point in today's presentation, and which is this: news reports and journalists could also amplify inaccurate information or confuse the public as well. So when Ramon asked me to join this panel, he said focus was on disinformation on social media, and when you hear that topic, most people probably think about user-generated content. But here in my next 8 minutes, I want to talk about how professional journalists and legit news organizations sometimes also spread inaccurate information and therefore confuse the public. And I would personally think that when mainstream media does this, the impact is much bigger than some users posting some nonsense, which may or may not go viral. So that's my premise of the presentation today. And I just want to show a few examples. This happened in Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, and many cities in Australia, as far as I know, which means this problem is probably universal. When COVID-19 hit our cities, I mean, in my case, I live in Hong Kong, and this happened in early February in 2020, in our case. So basically, the rumor started circulating saying that toilet paper factories in mainland China are shutting down because of the COVID-19. I mean, at the time, we didn't have the name COVID-19 because of this new coronavirus. And the city of Wuhan was already locked down. And many people were hearing about scary stories from mainland China in Hong Kong. And there was this rumor on the social media saying that toilet paper factories are shutting down. Therefore, we will run out of supplies very quickly. Well, it seems like many people believe that information that they got from, Facebook, WhatsApp messages, Facebook messengers, and whatnot. So they started going to supermarkets, convenience stores to buy toilet papers. The problem is, the story was completely bogus. Toilet paper companies were not shutting down. And when the rumor has started circulating, 2 major supermarket chains in Hong Kong, as well as Hong Kong government, came out publicly, said that we have enough supplies. If you keep buying toilet papers as you normally do, we can last at least for another 6 months, even if we don't have fresh supply. And at the moment, there was no plan for those factories to close in mainland China, so we don't have to worry. So the story was immediately sort of like debunked, but that didn't stop major news organizations to start making news about this panic buying. So on that day, if you look at Twitters, there are so many news reporters tweeting from shopping malls, supermarkets, convenience stores, showing empty shelves, people queuing up for 2 hours to buy toilet papers and stuff like that. If you turn on TV news programs, they also show, supermarkets which completely sold out tissues and other things. So this was panic buying actually sort of instigated by media reports, because if you behave normally without this sort of like media hype, probably we wouldn't have had this real shortage. So we did actually encounter toilet paper shortage for probably around a few weeks because of this. And it was created by false information, and it made it real by news organizations. This is a tweet from one of the journalists from Japan. And she said, "Hey, fellow journalists in Japan, don't do this. Don't just take, random photos and put it on Twitter, because it's panicking people and it's irresponsible." And I quite agree with her. And this is just one example, but I think it illustrates my point. And again, this happened not only in Hong Kong, but also in Japan, Singapore, and Australia. And I'm sure in many other countries, you might have faced similar problems. Vaccine efficacy is another gripe that I have quite often. Journalists don't often get science. So when they hear numbers like, oh, this vaccine is 95% efficient or effective, this vaccine is 96% effective, they immediately write stories saying that, oh, if 100 people are in this room, and if you're vaccinated, and the efficacy rate is 95%, 95 will be okay, and 5 people will get COVID. And that's completely bogus. I mean, to know how vaccine efficacy rate works doesn't require advanced math. Probably primarily 5 level mathematics will make you understand how the calculation is done. And I actually did this with my students with the back of the envelope, I mean, on the whiteboard. We downloaded the 3rd phase trial data from AstraZeneca and look at the control group and groups that have actually been given vaccines, and how many people got COVID afterwards in each group and compare and calculate the efficacy rate. Again, it takes only 10 minutes. And you only need basic math skills to understand if you have 100 people in the room, vaccinated or not, chances of you getting COVID-19 is close to 0. But that kind of story never gets to published. Instead, there's this comparison between different vaccines talking about this one's 30 percentage points more effective or not. And that was completely confusing. And there are some stories like you see on the screen, some journalists warning other fellow journalists saying that don't do this, before you write anything, try to understand what you're writing about, but it was too late. Lots of vaccine hesitancy came from these numbers, at least in Hong Kong initially. And this is not a new problem. When WHO announced that processed meat causes cancer, and in their category, they equated processed meat, 50 grams of eating processed meat every day equals to smoking in terms of risk. And many news organizations immediately jumped on this announcement saying that eating sausages and bacons are as harmful as smoking cigarettes. And that was hugely problematic. My colleague and I looked at 50 major news organizations' stories on this topic. Then there was only one article from Huffington Post actually got the numbers right. And everybody else, including what you see on the screen, BBC, CNN, Guardian, Vox, Bloomberg had an explainer which was wrong. So this is an ongoing problem. If you are interested, actually, the story was that if you eat processed meat more than the average, well, I wouldn't say more than average, but if you eat 50 grams of meat every day, processed meat every day, your chances of getting bowel cancer increases by 18%. So the question, the trick here is that increases by 18%. Your risk is not 18%. So and your base risk of developing that particular cancer is around 6 to 7%, depending on the country and age group. So even if it increases by 18%, your chances of getting it is still less than 1 percentage point up. So it's around 7 to 8%. Whereas smoking is at least 23 times higher risk than that. So it's nothing comparable, but news organizations didn't frame it that way. And I can go on and on and on talking about this. What you see on the screen are some research outcomes. On the left, you have a research paper from Cambridge. On the right, this is a consortium of researchers analyzing the genetic mutations of coronaviruses from the beginning. All these data, when they publish, there are lots of misreporting. Cambridge report was used to suggest that coronavirus actually started outside of China. And on the right, these data were used, especially in mainland China, saying that this actually proves the virus started in the US. And both are wrong. Cambridge researcher actually had to come out publicly after the story was completely misreported, saying that, listen, people, we did not say this. We did not say the virus came outside of China. The research doesn't show that, right? And the other one, I actually did this story with the students as well. We run a fact-checking operation on campus. We publish Monday through Friday. And this is one of the stories we did. We actually interviewed many researchers involved in research. And actually what data shows is that the origin is, at least the mutated viruses that they have analyzed at the moment, that was last year, it looks like every mutated version came from Wuhan. So that was what the data shows. But news organizations in mainland China reported completely opposite thing. So my suggestion, this is the last slide. I think there has to be more opportunities for journalists and scientists to get together to teach each other. Journalists need more training in basic statistics and relevant medical science knowledge. They just need to know more, right? After all, they're not experts, they're generalists. And I don't blame the journalists here. Their deadlines are tight. I used to work as a journalist. I understand the difficulties they have. But having said that, impact of misreporting on health information can be devastating. So they need to sort of have refreshers or teach themselves again basic mathematics and science. At the same time, scientists and researchers, they have to learn how to communicate with public better. You can't just publish news articles on a peer-reviewed journal and leave it there, because journalists gonna misreport it. You have to find ways to make it easier for reporters and the public to understand. And to do so, probably there has to be opportunities, lots of opportunities for both professionals to get together and teach each other. And that's my presentation. I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Masato Kajimoto. It is really interesting, and the highlight of that journalists should work together with scientists and learn how to communicate to the public is really hit the point. And next, we will learn from Professor Mohamed El-Gwindi. Professor Mohamed El-Gwindi,
hello.
the time is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very sorry because I got disconnected from the room, but now it works again. I'm very happy to be with you. I have 10 minutes or how many minutes I'll present?
Around 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, good. So I will share my screen with you. Just a moment. Yes. Do you see the screen now? Okay, so great. My presentation will be about the social media and the fight for our attention, because we are living now in a moment that we see that the global economy is changing from what I can call the material-based economy to something called our attention economy. So all people now are using social media to grab our attention, from news on media to policy, and also people who are using social media for profit and all those things. Even social media platforms is using algorithms to promote the attention grabbing techniques. And this is one of the most important things that media professionals need to understand, that things are changing nowadays, because even algorithms is playing with our mind in order to promote the attention economy. What I can say is this quote from Gustave Le Bon, when he said that crowds are influenced mainly by images produced by the judicious employment of words and formulas. And this is a very famous quote from Gustave Le Bon, which is, who is one of the famous people who talk about how to control people or how to manipulate the minds of people in the French Revolution. So when it comes to manipulating people, we are talking about propaganda and psychology, disinformation. And when it comes to disinformation, we are now living in the age of technology. So there is now a conversion between disinformation and technology, and its long history, as you can see from the timeline, started by the philosopher Sun Tzu and the Art of War book, and all his important strategies to defeat the enemy and manipulate people using psychological operations and all those things. Going on to the invention of the printing and how the printing affected the society, and also going to the Nazi propaganda, and also someone who is very important in advertising and manipulating people's mind, like Edward Bernays. He is one of the most important people in the area of manipulating mind using special messages and techniques using psychology. Also, we have the Cold War techniques, behavioral economics, the internet era, and finally social media and AI. So this is the era we are living in now. So when it comes to Edward Bernays, I would like to connect Edward Bernays to also Gustave Le Bon and the psychologist, the famous psychologist. I don't know if you know his photo. This is the most prominent psychologist in the world. When we are talking about psychology, we we will see that Edward Bernays just said, if we understand the mechanism and the motives of the group mind, it is not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing it. And that's what the algorithm is doing now. They connected the mathematics, and they connected all the psychological experiments to the algorithm in order to manipulate us. So it's not new, it's an old, but now it's connected to technology. So when we are seeing something like the art of manipulation and manipulating the masses, again, I will talk about the crowd and the study of popular mind for Gustave Le Bon, also the crystallizing public opinion for Edward Bernays, and the most prominent book, Propaganda, the Public Mind and the Making, for Edward Bernays also. So Edward Bernays is one of the most important people when we are talking about psychological mind and connection to the special messages, and also grabbing the attention. So how to let people paying attention to the message. And this is one of the exciting experiments used by Edward Bernays in the old days when he was looking for an advertisement for cigarettes. He started to manipulate the minds of women in order to buy cigarettes and smoke cigarettes on streets. He created something called torches of freedom, and took some photos for the ladies when she were smoking cigarettes, and published the papers, published on the newspapers, and they said, this is the freedom. So you need to be free, you need to be like men, and things like this. So this is when he started to use the psychological effect to manipulate people. So he linked something that grabbed the attention, like the freedom, in something tangible, like smoking cigarettes and all those things. So advertisers understand these psychological techniques. When they produce an ad, they are looking to grab your attention. They are looking for a crafted message to manipulate your mind in order to get your attention. So the attention is the most important thing that they are looking for. So once they got your attention captured, the ads need to persuade you to change your attitude or behavior regarding the product or the brand. So it's not about just grabbing the attention, it's also about the persuasion, how to persuade you in order to deal with this product or deal with this tangible thing. So it's about persuasion. So I think that our attention is limited resources. So the more we have access to information as we live now in the social media era, and also the explosion of information everywhere, I think the more we have information, the more our attention will be distracted. So I will go back to the attention economy in 1992 when Herbert Simon coined the term attention economy. He stated also that attention is a bottleneck of human thought. So attention is very important to the economy, as I said in the beginning of my presentations, that the economy is changing now. People are looking for getting your attention, because attention is the new currency. So in 1997, Michael Goldberg warned that international economy is shifting from the material-based economy to an attention-based economy. That's what I said when I start my presentation. And this is very important to understand, that economy is now changed. So this is pointing out to the many free services online, because nothing is free. When we started to see free things online, we started to see the world is very noisy. So it's now becoming very distracted, starting with Wikipedia, for example, in 2001, and going forward with the invention of camera phones, and also other social media platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Also going forward to Twitter, Netflix, Spotify, Instagram, Angry Bird, Snapchat, all those noise, because those noise are looking for your attention. That's why I'm saying it's noise. So we are going to very, very noisy world of information around us. All of those platforms are looking to grab our attention and to get our attention for longer, as long as they can. So in 1 minute of our attention, we can see that we have 4 million likes on Facebook in one minute of our attention. In 1 minute, we have 350K tweets on Twitter. We have 87K hours of video streamed on Netflix. Also, we have 300 hours of new videos uploaded to YouTube. And this is very, you know, very large data and information in 1 minute of our attention. So one of the most interesting things when we look at Netflix, for example, the CEO of Netflix said that our biggest competitor is sleep. So they are capitalizing on our attention. These platforms are looking to get us more, you know, aware of what they are doing. They need our attention 24 hours. So for social media, attention is everything. When you visit a traditional website, for example, you just get the information and go away. But on social media, it's different. The algorithm is trying to keep you hooked to the social media because they are getting your attention for 24/7, because this is how they make money. So social media platforms understand the scarcity of our attention and are adapting their business model to capitalize on it. That's based on the new technology evolving to use our attention in order to capitalize on our attention. All media platforms, social media platforms, are looking to do the same thing. Unfortunately, the traditional media, when I'm talking about, for example, something from the Middle East, is that traditional media in the Middle East is now copying what's said on social media to the traditional media. And this is very dangerous because social media, you know, has no rules in the media ethics and all those things we understand in the traditional media. And when traditional media is copying the trendy things from the social media to the traditional media, really that, you know, make very disastrous world in the media. I'm talking specifically in the Middle East because I'm living in the Middle East, so I see how people is copying things from social media directly without any, you know, processing or any, you know, adaptation before they are putting this on the traditional media. So when it comes to persuasion, I will quote also this you know, guy who worked in Google, and he is now one of the, you know, evangelists for the freedom of our attention from the persuasion of social media. He wrote this book, Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products. His name is Nir Ayal. In his book, he stated that technology companies use psychology to control users of their platforms, also build products that change behavior, connects user need to reward. When people are seeing reward, they will be hooked to the platform. So this book is very important, and also, you know, explained how you know, social media platforms use these techniques and add you know, add this to the algorithm. So people think now, especially when they are thinking in the technology of social media and how it hooked our mind, as something called the digital Skinner box. Skinner is a very important psychologist. He was the inventor of the Skinner box. It is psychological experiments, very well known in the psychological field. This guy explained how people can be hooked when they are inside an experiment of reinforced learning. So this is very important to understand that the platforms are using the same techniques. It gives you a reward of what you are doing on their platforms to keep you hooked inside the digital Skinner box. So it's all about giving a rewards, and the rewards is based on the dopamine. This is the chemicals that's, you know, it's already in our mind, but, you know, social media is playing with our dopamine you know, ingredients in our brain. So dopamine reward system tends to be more involved in wanting versus liking. So if you want to do something and you got reward, you will still do the same things all over. So that's known, well known in the social media as a scrolling dopamine loop. when you scroll in the social media, you are getting yourself into the loop of getting more dopamine when you are scrolling Facebook or TikTok or this social media. Do you ask yourself one day why all those social media is using the scrolling technique? Because the scrolling technique, it puts you in the scrolling dopamine loop. You are looking for something. So that's called also on the social media with something called FOMO, fear of missing something. So you are fearing of missing something. You are keep scrolling for nothing. So that's why it's a dopamine loop. And also it's a psychological experiment for the Pavlov. Pavlov is a psychologist. Also, he discovered the classical conditioning experiment in psychology. They connected these kind of experiments and psychological experience to the algorithm. So people think that we are now becoming Pavlov's dogs when we are hooked to social media, because social media is knowing how to play with our minds using the dopamine reward. So the psychological effect of social media is very important to understand, and I think this is very important for people to understand that it's not free. So when we mix psychology with technology, we have things that's not found in the traditional media. We can find AI, so the massive supercomputers that predict what show in order to keep you scrolling and clicking. They understand what are you thinking of. So it's always on, 24 hours, 24/7. We have also the social effect, the self-esteem, framing, fame, all the things that's social. We have also the personalization, which is not available in the traditional media. Personalization keeps you connected to these platforms. So it gives you, something we can call a behavioral addiction, like keeping, checking your phone. And these statistics are very old, by the way. Now I think it's very, it's broader than what we are seeing on the screen. It's bigger than we are seeing now, because this is old. 67 of teens checks their phones every 15 minutes. I think it's more now. I think people are looking at on the screens very often, and also we see Generation Z is looking everywhere to their screens, and even people who are looking to their phones every minute. So in this behavioral addiction, our brain is hooked and connected to the devices. So think of something like the phantom vibration syndrome. You think that your phone is vibrating, but it's not. That's because the phone, is hooking your mind. Your brain is hooked to the phone. And also we came to the mental health issues that's announced by the World Health Organization, because people are hooked to the devices for much time, and this is especially the youth created too many problems when it comes to the well-being and mental health issues. So in the Generation Z, we have very common features that make them vulnerable to what we are talking about social media effect and on this Generation Z. The problem with the Generation Z is that the lack of digital literacy. They have emotional issues, family issues, maybe dependent personality, cultural issues, and identity crisis. We have also a problem related to the religious system, and the beliefs that we are seeing on the social media. People are not easy to find someone to follow when it comes to the social psychological factors related to the problems of Generation Z. So social media is playing on all those things. So even if it's intentional or unintentional, but these things are affecting Generation Z. So nothing is free. You grant social media access to your attention, so they can alter your choices in exchange of entertainment. People don't understand these things. They understand that we are using it for free. Yes, it's free, but the currency here is your attention. So when they get your attention, it's not free. So my recommendation, and this is my last slides, I think we need to educate the public about the attention economy. So people need to understand that attention economy is something we need to pay attention to. So we need also to update the media and the information literacy curricula to add these things like the attention economy and psychological effect of social media. We need also to inform policymakers because they need to be aware on how to hold these tech companies accountable of what they are doing to our mind every day. And this is something very important because if policymakers don't understand that these platforms is harming youth and harming our, social life, it will not be easy to do something in this arena. And my final quote is from Hank Green. He's one of the most famous science communicator online. He said that the most sophisticated software in existence is tasked with figuring out how to keep you from leaving a website. And this is how the algorithm is developing now. They need you to be hooked. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Mohammed Elquidi. It's really interesting presentations, and we can highlight the manipulating mind, capitalizing scarcity, and then behavioral addiction that goes into mental health. That's really scary, actually, but we will discuss it later. And now I would like to invite Professor Cyril Soriano to present your paper.
With your permission, I'd like to use my own slides. Is that okay?
Yes, sure.
Thank you. Let me just share it. All right. Good day, everyone, and thanks very much to AMIC for inviting me in this conference. Just checking if you can all hear me okay, and the slide is showing well. So my talk today will focus on the role of social media intermediaries in science communication, the construction of narrative and actor networks, and its implications for facilitating scientific understanding of, knowledge in the contemporary digital environment. Intermediaries have historically served crucial roles in bridging scientists and society. Given the complexity of scientific information and jargon, intermediaries can help translate complicated information for target publics, sometimes conveying these into stories that can make scientific ideas and policies more compelling, relatable, and persuasive. So, for example, these include professional science communicators and journalists, museums, scientific magazines, professional organizations, and even university professors that have played important roles in synthesizing what is known from science and hoping that these can guide decisive action and behavior by people. In the social media environment, however, this environment has enabled and conditioned the rise of what we know as micro-celebrities or influencers and networks of multiple intermediaries that have the capacity of simplifying scientific information too, but also simultaneously seeding doubt, spreading conspiracy, ambiguity, and unnecessary panic and fear in relation to science. Well, although all these intermediaries have continued to play a role in the pandemic context, in the context of social media intermediaries, it's important to examine their role in the continuing construction of knowledge cultures in relation to science. In my particular research on YouTube, which is where my current study is focused on, the popularity of micro-celebrities is currently being studied in the context of science, even though in the past, they have been studied more in the context of lifestyle, entertainment, and brand communication. YouTube is important, and the role of micro-celebrities in YouTube as well, because these micro-celebrities have translated into conveying messages where knowledge becomes obtained from their own lived experiences. On YouTube as well, it's important to recognize what Utz and Wolfers calls YouTube being epistemic communities, where YouTube is critical and no longer just a source for entertainment, but people go to YouTube and subscribe to micro celebrities and influencers where information from politics to science to history can be explained in more entertaining formats through explainer videos or inserted in stories of travel, cooking, leisure, and so on. Because of the scale of following and potential shareability and traction of content in hybrid media spaces that flows from YouTube to other platforms, the role of intermediaries requires careful attention, especially in the pandemic context. So indeed, while YouTube has democratized knowledge production and skill sharing by providing users with a platform to share ideas by virtue of its incentive structure and participatory affordances, it has also subordinated credible expertise to a logic of likability and subscription, meaning the more likes or subscribers, the content being shared may start to look believable. YouTube carries with it an inclusive cultural characteristics that make it a connective force for different actors. So in the Philippines, and I guess in many other parts of Asia, YouTube has gained traction with a growing number of micro-influencers obtaining thousands to millions of subscribers. At the same time, we have begun to use YouTube as an educational resource for our classrooms as a teacher, turning it into an ambiguous space that mixes credible and dubious information. Examining the working of YouTube requires identifying its material dimensions and how these interrelate with the specific actors and processes as a network. In assemblage theory, technology is seen as an actor, but along with other actors engaging with it that contributes to its form in the process. Thus, the YouTube that we know is a product of the technological artifact for its affordances or its governance mechanisms, as well as its users, including the influencers, and the practices conducted around it and the organizational forms created or surfacing around these practices that simultaneously shape what YouTube is that we know. So in studying YouTube's role in the construction of scientific discourses, we need to explore two things: the platform's affordances and logics, and secondly, what users do on the platform. Platforms such as YouTube do things by embodying a command structure such that everyday experiences are mediated, augmented, and conditioned by the platform's affordances and logics. This includes what it makes visible or invisible, or what it doesn't show or what it shows, but also how it ranks or orders content in the recommendation. So even if content is technically visible, if it's not well ranked, it will not get attention. Platforms also curate content for particular users based on their preferences or consumption data. And finally, platforms incentivize particular kinds of content and determines the rules on which it incentivizes. On the other hand, content creators, or what we know as micro-celebrities, are conscious of the platform's vernaculars or cultures of use, and they employ corresponding presentation and engagement tactics that make use of platform affordances such as channel creation, using YouTube Live, subscription bells, keywords, and tags. We observe that scientific content and claims to knowledge can be creatively blended with an influencer's travel or lifestyle content, and even politics. They can use genre elements of news as well as if they are broadcasters to appear compelling. The engagement of authenticity in casual talk and infotainment styles allows YouTube creators to make content appealing and relatable. This is where they become interesting in terms of how they fuse entertainment styles and communicative strategies attuned to the ordinary people's tastes and logics. So here is an example. These are known Filipino political influencers, but interestingly, they have surfaced in our searches to be also tackling COVID-19 issues, for example. What is interesting here is that if we look at the number of subscribers of these two channels, both of them have over 500,000 subscribers, and the views of their videos reach quite a lot of traction as well. I wanted to put forward three important things. So the first is on how the platform visibilizes and orders content. And I take this from existing research by Marshall and Au. So Marshall and Au found that and point out that Despite the adjustments on YouTube's governance mechanisms, content by micro-celebrities about the coronavirus gained much more traction and engagement than other types of videos. They found that channels of World Health Organization and National Health Science also did not appear prominently in their algorithmic recommendation systems, which recommendations were dominated by news outlets and independent micro-celebrities. They further argue that because YouTube has made it easier to present oneself as an expert and gain a reputation for credibility and trustworthiness among a dedicated fan base, well, one can achieve attention without relying on the apparatus typically required of professional print and digital news outlets, thus reshaping who can be regarded as an authoritative voice in all topics, including science. The second point that I wanted to emphasize is how influencers in our studies present themselves as news sources of trust from below. So in many of the narratives across different kinds of influencing and topics, and including in science, influencers would show themselves as and their content as a product of a fellow ordinary person, but well-researched and one who can be trusted because one has done his own research, or that one is speaking from one's own experience and or opinion based on lived experiences of other people whom he or she has observed. They also cast doubts on the media and scientists and educators, noting that the stories that they, quote unquote, show are selective and sometimes they may be hiding something from us. The third set of tropes within here is where they will argue that, well, thanks for social media and thanks for our channels, we have the chance to see the light of these realities from below. The last point that I wanted to emphasize is the network nature of narratives, network nature of personal narratives. So YouTube poses some challenges to some key assumptions on how we understand, assess, and act on online falsehoods. And that is that conspiracy narratives and falsehoods are told not via individual texts alone, but across networks of texts, such as videos and channels that form potent meta-narratives that work because they are able to connect to people's sensibilities. Individually, content can appear gray or somewhat gray and not easy to fact check all the time. And both their intent and level of harm is hard to assess at the onset. Some of the most insidious content out there isn't in your face, something that one can easily assess in terms of its intentionality or categorize them easily. Yet, if placed in the aggregate, they can start to appear more compelling because when one searches, one further finds information to support that. Let's take, for example, some COVID-related disinformation themes found in the Philippines, and we've tried to track them as networks of narratives. Conspiracy theories on the origin of the virus, so the colors on the orange, are connected narratively to conspiracy stories about the virus itself, that the virus is not real or that it is just fabricated by hospitals and medical people to make money. All these, the color orange, can in one way or the other connect to some logics of the other color. So the second cluster of content also form related meta-narratives. One on the middle cluster pertains to a set of videos where YouTubers convey how they cope with getting the virus, so which is their own presentation of their experience, and how they cure themselves or family members through homemade therapy. This is connected to the second cluster, which are false cures. False cures is a narrative network because there are many kinds of false cures being advanced by different influencers, from steam therapy to the discovery of wonder drugs that in other videos are further amplified with stories that governments are hiding them or curbing them for some political or monetary reasons. This narrative cluster is connected to the last one about vaccine information. There remain videos where YouTubers would narrate or amplify scare stories about vaccines or share their own opinion about it, meaning they're not saying it per se, they're sharing their opinion about it, that they agree with it or they're feeling afraid about it, again, seeding doubt. If we read closely, this narrative cluster connects to the idea of false cures as well. So YouTubers rarely present a simple, blatant manipulation of knowingly false information. A common strategy is to seed doubt through the creative blending of fact and fiction. So what I'm saying here is that the grayness of this interlocution makes it very hard to regulate at the same time. So I close with a few points. YouTube has become a source of information and knowledge. How it has evolved into hosting educational content becomes important because multiple knowledge claims are being made in this space by multiple actors, scientists, and also micro-celebrities. Because it is a space that students and ordinary people go to now to find out about layman's knowledge and experience, we need to be more cognizant but also guided on how to navigate the information that we search for and encounter in this space. I highlighted that the process of information creation and circulation in the form of network actors, platform, intermediaries such as influencers and audiences is important. Action and accountability means that these need to be taken by all these actors and not just the users and audiences. Second, information on YouTube are by expert scientists and medical practitioners who conduct detailed research on the information that they share, but these take place alongside content of micro-celebrities who only want to share their personal views and opinions, or sometimes even seed a lot of doubt and misinformation. I point out that not all influencers intend to disinform, but it is important that users of the platform are guided in navigating such breadth of mixed information on the platform. Given the number of emerging influencers, some of them even with MDs or PhDs in their channel titles, it is imperative for platforms and scientific communities to certify or acknowledge which are expert channels that can be trusted so that its users can be guided sufficiently as well. Third, we can no longer neglect social media as a source of information by ordinary people, and we cannot remain focused on exclusive webinars, museums, and journals that reach only a limited few. If we stay only in these secluded spaces, doubts that information has been made exclusive for elites and do not address the need of ordinary publics will pursue. We need to rethink formal science intermediary approaches to reach and attune, like micro-celebrities, strategies for populations across social classes. Importantly, we need to work together so that this content by trusted sources can gain traction. So in the keynote, Secretary de la Peña talked about DOEO's TV, but it has 5,600 subscribers in comparison to the influencer channels I showed earlier that has over 500,000 or 500,000 subscribers. Fourth, we need to move from single content analysis to how conspiracy stories are made palatable and compelling through networks of narrative, not only on YouTube, but how this cascades outside of YouTube onto Facebook, onto Messenger, onto Viber groups, and so on and so forth. Also including to our backyard conversations and dinner tables. And lastly, given the ensuing points, I emphasize the importance of normalizing discussions about trust and further understanding audiences. In classrooms and everyday conversations, we need to openly reflect on why we or our peers trust the sources, platforms, and influencers that they follow. Dismissing or calling out these people only intensifies cocooning and echo chambers. If we can normalize conversations about trust in information and information sources, we may be able to better understand how knowledge culture is developing in the contemporary digital environment. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Zaril Ruth. From her presentation, we can understand that there is a social media dilemma. There is a positive thing and also a negative thing, but we encourage people to have more critical thinking and see that there is some hegemony from the social media to our life. Yes, we will discuss it later on. And last but not least, I would like to invite Ms. Ginny Smith. Time is yours.
Unmute, that will be helpful. Hi everyone, so thank you so much for inviting me. It's been amazing to be here on this panel full of professors doing fantastic research, and I found myself nodding along to a lot of what you've been saying so far. in this session. I just want to start by telling you a little bit about me. So I am a professional science communicator. I'm freelance, so I work with various organizations, and I've done a whole bunch of different things, from writing books, both for adults and for young people, through to presenting on YouTube and on kind of other video platforms. I do a lot of shows and live events in schools and at science festivals and things. So basically, I spend my time talking to people about science and talking to people who don't necessarily have a background in science. And one of the things that I've been really interested in this is why people believe misinformation. So yes, there's a lot of it out there, but what is it about it that makes it so sticky, that makes people not just believe it when they read it, but remember it and pass it on? And what could we as communicators actually learn from that? I just need to say that there is currently a thunderstorm going on in Singapore where I am. So if there's a clash of thunder, I apologize. I hope you can still hear me okay. So why are myths so sticky? Well, first up, these items, whether they are misinformation or disinformation, that is, whether they are mistakes or whether they've been created purposefully to try and trick people, they tend to be really simple statements. They tend to be things you could tell people in one sentence. They also tend to be quite emotional. They're things that make us feel something. And both of those things make them much easier for our brains to remember. My background's in neuroscience, so I always tend to try and kind of work out what's going on in the brain. And it seems that our brains are much better at latching onto things that fit in with our understanding of the world, that seem to kind of make intuitive sense. And that makes them memorable. The problem with science is that quite often it's not simple and it doesn't intuitively make sense. So the big question is, how do we present complicated, not even facts, things where we don't quite know the answer yet? How do we present that nuance in a way that is going to be as memorable and as sticky as the misinformation is? And this is where I think social media can actually have a real benefit. So for people to believe something when you tell it to them, they have to know you, they have to like you, and they have to trust you. And one of the problems I think that scientists often have is that they present their facts and they think that that should be enough to get people to believe them. Whereas actually, as humans, we like to know who it is that we're listening to. We like to know a bit of the story, both about them and about whatever it is that they're talking about. And social media can give scientists a chance to share bits of their personal lives alongside the information that they're trying to get across. And that can help people get to know them, get to like them, and get to trust them. So I've picked out a few examples of science communicators who I think have been doing an amazing job sharing really great social media content throughout the pandemic. I've mainly gone with TikTok just because they're short and snappy and easy to show in a presentation, but there are lots of great people doing stuff on Instagram and Twitter and all sorts of other things. So this first clip that I want to show you is from a science communicator who has a needle phobia. And she was sharing loads of pro-vaccine information throughout the pandemic, but she also shared her experiences of getting the vaccine and that it wasn't all positive for her. So hopefully I can, oh, how do I go to the next slide? Oh, there. So I think just the ability to share these bits of of stuff about your life, stuff that humanizes you, just shows that scientists are people too. And one of the other things that I think has been great throughout the pandemic is that the scientists who've been sharing on social media have also been telling us a bit about how science is done. They've been explaining that when stuff has just happened, we don't always know all the answers, and that when new information comes in, we have to revise our policies, revise our guidance, all of those kinds of things. And these are things that can erode trust in science if people don't understand how science works. So there's a lot of talk about, you know, governments doing U-turns and stuff. Oh, well, you were saying we didn't need masks, and then you were saying we did need masks. And actually, I think if we shared more about the process of science and how it's done, and that it's all about revising our understanding with new information, I think that can be really beneficial for helping people to trust scientists more. I think the other thing that social media does really well is providing kind of digestible, bite-sized bits of science, things that make it memorable. And there are a few different ways that you can do this. So one is just by making things really short and snappy. And I think that's the clip that I've got for you next.
It's not going to get much more clear than this. In the month of May in the United States, there were about 18,000 deaths from COVID-19. Only 0.8% of those were in people who were fully vaccinated. More than 99% of the people who died from COVID last month were not fully vaccinated.
So what he's done there is just a beautiful summary. It's basically a headline. This is the kind of thing that people are going to be scrolling. It's going to come up on their feed. They're going to have taken in some science without even realizing they've done it. You can also add to the kind of stickiness and the chances of people starting to follow these influencers by using humor. And that's something that's been done really well on TikTok and Instagram and other social media things throughout the pandemic. So this is actually from the same scientist, and this is no science information in this, but it's funny. I thought
the PhD
funny.
immunologist in the United States during a pandemic. Now I feel like I have a really good understanding of what climate scientists feel like all of the time.
So I liked that he was just sharing a bit of his frustrations about trying to communicate the science. And it's just quite funny. This was one of the videos that made me start following this scientist on TikTok. And I think there's real benefits to that. TikTok and social media also gives you the chance to do what misinformation does, in that you can expose people to the same information over and over again. And we know that the more you read something, even if you don't believe it, the more you start believing it. So if someone tells you the same bit of misinformation over and over again, you're going to start believing it. But if someone tells you the same bit of true information over and over again, you might start believing it as well. And there's a nice thing about TikTok where there are these trends that go round with different pieces of music, or you have to learn a dance or that kind of thing. And people will start scrolling on those trends. So if scientists start using that and making videos that link to those trends, but that tell them bits of information, you might actually be able to access people who wouldn't seek out science information. And that's what this next video does. So this is a trend that was going around on TikTok that she's used for vaccine information.
Yo.
So again, it's using that bit of humor, it's using quick, easy to digest bits of science and giving people the chance to have these multiple exposures to correct information from reliable sources. When it comes to actually debunking incorrect information, though, we have to be really careful. Because I just said that if you repeat misinformation or disinformation, you can actually reinforce it to some extent in people's heads. But research has started to find that as long as you do it carefully, it can have a positive effect. So if you are a communicator and you're trying to debunk some piece of information that's out there, what do you need to do? Well, the important things are to try not to repeat the misinformation too often. Don't say it any more than you have to in order to debunk it. To make sure you lead with the truth if you can, or at least put a really obvious warning up front that what they're hearing to start with is misinformation. Now, there's another trend in TikTok where you can do what's called a stitch, where you take the beginning bit of someone else's video and then effectively make a reply to it. And actually, I think this could be quite dangerous for spreading misinformation, because the tendency is for scientists to take a bad video, a piece of video that's spreading misinformation, put it up front and then reply to it. But the problem is, if people are scrolling, they might only watch that beginning bit and not watch the rest. So I do think we have to be really careful with that. The other thing is to make sure that you don't leave people with a gap in their understanding. Human brains hate it when they're confused. So if they think they know something and you're telling them that's wrong, what we have to do is tell them why it's wrong and tell them how the correct information fits that knowledge gap. So I've got an example here of a stitch video where someone's debunking, and I think they've done a pretty good job of it. There's a nice warning up front and they do a good job of explaining it.
Apparently, you've been wearing your mask wrong. If you're not sick, you need to wear your mask with the blue side towards your face. And if you're sick, you need to wear it with the white side towards your face.
Let me explain why this is nonsense. Cut my blue surgical mask in half, and as you can see, it's got 3 different layers. The outer blue layer is waterproof, the middle layer blocks particles, and the inner layer absorbs moisture. If I wear the mask like this, the inner absorbent layer will catch any respiratory droplets if I cough or sneeze and keep the mask dry. Now, if I wear the mask inside out like this inner blue layer is not going to absorb any of my respiratory droplets. The mask becomes wet and loses its pathogen blocking abilities.
So I like that he hasn't just said, this is rubbish. He's explained why it's rubbish. He's shown you what the actual truth is and explained to you why that's right. So I think social media can be a really good way of tackling some of this misinformation and of breaking down that barrier that we can find between experts and the public, whatever we mean by each of those. It can also create a sense of community, because it's not just a one-way type of communication. People can comment, they can reply, and actually these scientist influencers do have some really good interactions where people can send in questions, they can get them answered, and I think these can have really positive benefits on how people trust scientists and therefore kind of understand a little bit more about where this information is coming from. So I do think there is also, as some of my colleagues have said, a benefit to teaching people how to spot misinformation when they're on social media. And there are also some influencers who are trying to do this, who are trying to get people to learn how to work out whether a source is trustworthy, whether the author's got an agenda, and all of those kinds of things as well. But just to finish off, because I know we want to leave some time for questions, I wanted to share a few of the social media influencers who I've been following throughout the pandemic and who I think are doing a brilliant job of communicating. The first 4 are the ones whose videos I used. The other 4 are just a few more that I love. Some of them are mostly on Instagram. Susie is mostly on Twitter. She's a New Zealand researcher. But if you are looking for examples of great communication on social media, I would recommend following some of this lot. If you want to follow me, you can also find me on all the platforms. I'm Ginny Smith Sci, as my kind of work that I do for grown-ups, or the stuff I do for kids is all under Braintastic Sci. So yeah, I will pass back to our moderator now, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ginny. We can realize that we have a very beautiful brain that we can manage by producing message or using a message. So as a prosumers, we have to be creative in using the platform as well as producing the content itself. So we still have 5 minutes, but I think it's not enough for question and answer. I will ask, pardon me. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there is one question I would like to ask the the presenters to answer. Just a moment, I'll see it. Okay. How can so-called experts produce practical research about social media when they are averse to it and do not know how to use them? So it's another literacy. Well, okay, I would like to ask, first of all, Professor Mohammed, and then Professor Masato Kajimoto, and Professor Celine, and then Ms. Smith. Professor Mohammed?
Thank you very much for being here, and also thanks for all the presenters, because we really enjoyed the presentations. And for the question, I think yes, it's good to understand how to use social media before starting to analyze how social media is affecting our mindset. Because if you don't understand how to use social media, so people will not, will not believe you if you say that social media is right and wrong, and social media is doing something to our mind, social media is affecting us, but you don't understand how social media is working. Makes people don't understand you, so make people don't believe you. So I think it's important for researchers and experts who are working with social media, like Jenny was about to introduce us to how science communicators are using social media. Yes, they are researchers, they are scientists, and they understand how to use social media for the benefit of spreading the word about science. And this is what I'm doing here in Egypt, for example, in my TV show, and also on the social media. I have millions of followers who are looking to learn something, and this is why you need to get their attention to learn something. Because I was talking about social media getting your attention. Yes, if you understand that social media is playing with the attention of people, you need also, as a scientist and also as a science communicator, to play with the same game. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Next, Professor Masato.
Yes, thank you for the question. I agree with Professor Mohammed 100%. If you don't understand social media, you can't research, you can't have any practical suggestions. You have to be a very heavy user of social media platforms as a researcher. And many of the colleagues I have, at least, researching social media, they are, well, I think for the audience, it's a bit confusing, because heavy user doesn't mean they always post something, or they always interact with followers. More researchers that tend to be monitoring lots of accounts, using different functions, but they're not doing it in a public way. So they've been probably following Twitter for 3 hours a day, but they are not tweeting by themselves anything. So you may not see how heavily involved those researchers are, but at least the ones I know, they are using social media, and they're quite understanding it. And I also agree that when you make practical advice, well, of course, it's great if scientists can do it by themselves. But in my case, for example, next month, we are launching 5 YouTube video campaigns with 5 different influencers on that platform, talking about media literacy, some aspects of media literacy. And I do this with 5 different influencers because I know I cannot do it myself. Each influencer has tens of millions of followers, and their channel, each episode can easily get a few million views. So I can never reach that level. But if I could identify some influencers who understand what I'm trying to do, and if I can work with them, and I think that's a better model to apply what I know to, tackle the problems that we are discussing here, than me doing it or some scientists doing it. If everybody's Neil deGrasse Tyson, problem solved. But the problem is, many scientists don't want to even go public. So I think there has to be a way to collaborate. Yeah, that's my long-winding answer.
Thank you. Prof. Cyril, Tanisha?
Yes, I totally agree with my colleagues. I guess just a couple of things that I'll add is the importance of conversations and dialogue between scientists and content creators and media studies experts, etc. Because sometimes I understand where this question is coming from. There's an assumption that some experts are so directed at their own research that they might not actually understand the bigger picture out there, or even the complexities of social media, which is also really a continually changing and dynamic environment. But I guess collaborations and dialogues with different, we call this interdisciplinarity, right, will help us understand each other, especially in the context of science communication.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, please.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think this comes back to what Professor Kajimoto was saying at the beginning about we need to train scientists to work with journalists or social media influencers, and then we need to do the other way around as well and train the journalists to understand the science. And I think there is a common language, and one of the things I'm really passionate about is teaching scientists how to use storytelling when they're explaining their research, because I think all of these things have a common language, and humans have a common language, which is stories. So one of the things that I love doing is going into universities and working with groups of researchers who start off telling me their research by kind of reeling off the latest journal title, and by the end of it they're telling a story about why they're doing that and what it is they're hoping to achieve, and their dreams and their hopes and their fears. And actually that's the kind of thing that is going to engage people, and that is going to translate into whatever form you want to communicate in, whether that's a video or it's a written or it's a social media video. It all comes down to stories.
Thank you. Well, we are running out of time, but there is two more questions. I would like all panelists answer it quickly. So the first question is, should governments regulate the use of social media? And the second question, okay, so just one question, please. Start with Prof. Mohammed, and then Prof. Masato, Prof. Cheryl, and Ms. Smith, please.
Okay, this is a difficult question, by the way, because because the word regulation is tricky. And you can say yes, let's regulate social. I will try to answer very fast because of the time. But when you say that we need to regulate social media, we are talking about the legal aspect of using social media, and this is maybe some kind of politics going on this perspective. And when you are putting this on the table, I think it's difficult to say that yes, we can regulate social media. I don't think it's easy, because regulating cyberspace at large is not easy. So that's what I can say from my own experience. Even at least in the United Nations, it's not easy.
I can only talk about my specialized area, but I am against the idea of regulating content. But I think internet advertising needs to be regulated. Like Professor Mohammed said, attention economy is a big problem behind why misinformation can spread. Somebody is making money off this phenomenon, and that can be stopped in one way or another if you could regulate internet advertising a bit more. Because media advertising has been regulated for a long time in history, and there's a reason. And Professor Mohammed had a smoking example, and how smoking ads are now being regulated in many countries for magazine ads, TV commercials. So I think same thing should be done on internet advertising as well, even though it's extremely difficult because it goes beyond one jurisdiction. It involves multi-countries, and it's really hard to regulate an organization in completely different countries. So it's hard, but I think we should be talking about this.
Thank you. Next, Prof. Cheryl, please.
Yes, I totally agree with them. Regulation has many different meanings. Regulation can mean stifling content or taking down content, to also encouraging or incentivizing particular kinds of content over others. I think I will go with the second one, wherein, as shown very nicely by Ginny, there's a lot of very good content out there. The question is that, are these incentivized by publics, and not just government? The question is about governments regulating. But there's a thing about social media is that we all co-construct it, right? We as users, and there is a thing of self-regulation as well. So if we can all continually incentivize such content that we can actually learn from and have more publics learn from, I think it's a good thing. And governments coming in and coming up with stifling regulation, I think is very risky, but also should be open to conversations. But again, being it potentially prone to abuses in various ways, I think we need to take caution about discussions about government regulation in these formats.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
Yeah, I totally agree that I think government regulation is very risky, but I do think there's maybe room for some tweaks to the algorithm. So at the moment, a lot of the algorithms seem to incentivize this very dramatic stuff that gets watches, and particularly on TikTok, you don't even have to like or comment on something. You just have to watch it the whole way through, and suddenly your feed will be flooded with the same kind of content. So I wonder if there's something that can be done around boosting the good stuff and maybe damping down anything that gets reported as misinformation or as offensive or anything like that, without actually completely censoring it. And maybe it's not a government thing, but maybe there is something that can be done, in the same way that Instagram now puts a little bubble if you mention the word coronavirus, saying here's where you can go to get good information. Maybe that kind of thing is the way to go.
Thank you so much. It was really fruitful discussions, and we learned a lot from all the presenters, from the manipulating mind, capitalization, behavioral addictions to mental health, and also hegemony of the social media. And the keywords we can highlight here is collaborations and conversation among disciplines, among practitioners and academic, as well as government, because we are all constructing this situation, and we have to discuss this issue further. So I think time is up. Thank you very much for sharing this beautiful talk, and perhaps all the audience also have a wider understanding on the social media. Is it order or disorder? And the most important thing is the critical thinking in using the social media. So again, thank you very much for this discussion. I will give the time back to the MC. Thank you.